I felt my body go numb. The daughter next to me stopped moving, and then I heard my wife whisper, "They'll be gone soon." We just sat down to dinner, but what happened next destroyed everything I believed in. She poisoned us for a new life, but I heard it and everything changed. Subscribe so you don't miss other stories. Write in the comments what you would do in my shoes. Share this video. You could save someone's life. It was a Thursday, the kind of gray, unassuming day that passes without note, the kind of day that slips through your fingers before you even realize it started. I had finished a full day of remote work, buried in lines of code that blurred together after a while. My daughter Maddie was sitting at the kitchen table working on a math assignment she had already halfway memorized. She's 10, whip smart, and way too perceptive for her age. My wife Lauren had just gotten home. She stood in the doorway for a second, watching us. "I'm cooking dinner tonight," she said, taking off her coat with a casual smile. I turned in my chair, blinking at her. "You're what?" "Cooking," she repeated. "I figured you could use a break, both of you." That alone should have told me something was wrong. Lauren didn't cook, not because she couldn't. She just didn't see the point. We had delivery apps, money, and a pantry full of things she considered beneath her. She was the type to schedule everything in 5-minute increments, delegate everything that didn't serve a purpose, and scoff at the idea of peeling potatoes when there was a Whole Foods 10 minutes away. But I said nothing. I smiled instead. "That's nice of you." She kissed Maddie lightly on the head, something she hadn't done in weeks, and disappeared into the kitchen with a little hum. The sound startled me more than I admitted at the time. Lauren didn't hum, at least not anymore. I watched her for a few moments from the hallway, the way she moved around the kitchen like she knew exactly where everything was, measuring spices, slicing vegetables, boiling water. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows of her crisp white blouse, and there was a kind of fluidity to her gestures. It was too practiced, too controlled. I should have seen it then, how rehearsed it looked, but I didn't, because I wanted to believe her. Maybe this was her way of trying. Maybe she had realized how far apart we drifted and was making some quiet, awkward effort to bridge the chasm between us. The way she was moving around the stove, placing each item in its perfect place, felt almost like a performance. And I, the willing audience, sat back down and tried to ignore the unease creeping into my chest. We'd been together 15 years, married for 12. I knew Lauren better than I knew myself, or I thought I did. She was a brilliant woman, calculating, strategic. She had graduated at the top of her class and worked for one of the best firms in the city. Her ambition had always been relentless. At first, I'd found it exhilarating. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Magnetic, sharp, unstoppable. But over the last 2 years, something had shifted. It started slowly. Missed dinners, distracted conversations, more hours at work, then weekends. At first I didn't mind. I knew her job was demanding. I supported her. But then the coldness crept in. The way she looked at me like I was a placeholder. The way she stopped kissing Maddie goodnight. The silence at breakfast. The way her phone was always face down, always password protected. Calls she took in the car, always with the door shut. Excuses that never quite added up. Still, I said nothing. Not because I was naive, but because I didn't want to break it. The illusion. The idea that maybe, just maybe, she would find her way back to us. That Maddie wouldn't have to grow up in a house that crumbled from the inside. So when she said she was cooking dinner, I told myself it was a sign. Dinner was served at 6. Maddie had helped set the table, beaming with pride as she laid out the mismatched cloth napkins she'd picked herself. She was excited. Her mother never did things like this anymore. She saw it as special, and I didn't have the heart to taint that moment with suspicion. Lauren brought out the plates with a flourish, like a waitress presenting the chef's masterpiece. There was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed with garlic. It looked good, smelled even better. My stomach grumbled as I sat down. Maddie clapped her hands and dug in. Lauren poured us all water with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I took a bite. The chicken was fine. Over-seasoned, maybe, but edible. The green beans were strong with garlic, Too strong for Maddie's liking, I could tell, but she ate them without complaint. It was the mashed potatoes that struck me first. They looked off. Too glossy, too uniform, almost like paste. The consistency was strange, too creamy, not a lump in sight. I didn't say anything at first, I just chewed, slowly. The taste was okay at first, but there was something beneath it. A bitterness, barely there, like an aftertaste you weren't supposed to notice unless you were paying attention. I reached for my water, drank a long gulp, and glanced across the table. Maddie was chewing more slowly now. She frowned a little, rubbed her belly. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked. She nodded, then whispered, "My tummy feels funny." It was the way she said it that hit me. Not dramatic, not a complaint, a quiet observation. Like she wasn't sure if she should even say it aloud. I turned to Lauren. She was watching us, her face the perfect mask of concern. "Maybe the garlic's too much," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She gave a small laugh. "Guess I'm a bit rusty in the kitchen." Then she stood up, not all at once, not like she was responding to an emergency. Casually, calmly, she picked up her plate, half a foot, and carried it to the sink. I watched her rinse it, slowly, methodically, like she was washing away something more than food. That's when I felt it. A wave of dizziness, slow and strange. Not the kind that comes when you stand up too fast. The kind that rolls over you like fog, heavy and sudden. My fingers began to tingle. My tongue felt thick. I blinked hard, trying to clear the blur forming at the edge of my vision. Maddie had stopped eating. She leaned forward, pressing a hand to her stomach. Her breathing was shallow, lips slightly parted. "Dad," she whispered again, "I feel really weird." I pushed back my chair, or at least I tried to. My legs didn't respond the way they should have. My knees buckled, and I caught the table's edge before I hit the ground. My heart was pounding, my throat tightening. Then I saw Lauren. She wasn't rushing to help. She wasn't asking if we were okay. She was just standing there at the sink, drying her hands slowly on a dish towel. No panic, no confusion, just silence. That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't food poisoning. This was something else. My instincts, dulled by years of domestic routines and quiet avoidance, screamed to life. Maddie was slipping in her chair, her eyes fluttering. I reached for her, forced my muscles to cooperate. My fingers trembled as I pulled her toward me. We both collapsed to the floor. I cradled her gently, shielding her with my body. My vision dimmed further, but I clung to consciousness with everything I had left. I pressed my lips close to her ear and whispered the only words I could manage. "Don't move, pretend you're asleep." Her small body shivered against mine, but she didn't speak. I let my head rest against the floor, forced my breathing to slow. My limbs were heavy, useless, but my mind was burning, alive with horror. I heard footsteps, soft, measured, approaching. Lauren. I felt her presence before I saw her. She stood just a few feet away, hovering. Then she exhaled, quietly, calmly. "It's done," she whispered. "They'll both be gone soon." Gone. The word echoed through my skull like a bell tolling in a dark cathedral. I wasn't supposed to hear that. I wasn't supposed to be alive to hear that. And I was. And somehow I knew I had one chance. One moment. And it started now. I don't know how long I lay there on the kitchen floor with Maddie pressed against my chest, her body still and warm beneath my trembling arm. The moments blurred together, suspended in a haze of fear and chemical fog. The floor beneath my cheek was cool, the faint scent of garlic and bleach rising from it. Somewhere in the house, I heard the soft rhythm of footsteps retreating, measured and deliberate. Lauren wasn't in a hurry. She didn't need to be. In her mind, it was over. But I wasn't gone yet. Neither was Maddie. My body felt like it had turned to concrete, dense and sluggish. I couldn't feel my legs, and my arms only responded with jerks and shudders. But my mind was clear. Hyper clear, in fact. The adrenaline forced every thought into high definition, sharpening each sound, each breath, each flicker of motion into something urgent and immediate. Maddie's breath was shallow, but it was there. Her chest rose and fell, just enough. I shifted my fingers, barely, and squeezed her hand with what little strength I could muster. She didn't move, but I felt a faint twitch in her palm. She had heard me. She was still here. Don't move. It was the only thing I could think to tell her, the only command that mattered, because if Lauren thought we were dead or dying, she wouldn't come back. She wouldn't need to check, and that bought us time. Not much, but enough. I strained my ears, the soft creak of the bedroom door opening, the murmur of the TV turning on in the distance, a commercial playing, the door closing again. She was settling in. She believed it was done. I had to move. It started with my fingers. I focused every ounce of willpower into wiggling them. They responded, sluggish but alive. Then came my forearms, trembling under the weight of my own body. I slid one beneath Maddie's back, pulling her closer. Her face was pale and clammy, her lips tinged a ghostly blue. Her eyes were closed, but her lashes fluttered slightly as I whispered to her again. "We're getting out of here, just hold on." I dragged myself forward, inch by agonizing inch, with Maddie cradled beside me. The kitchen floor turned to tile as I reached the hallway, my vision swimming with every shallow breath. I kept my body low, movement slow. The last thing I needed was for Lauren to hear anything. My shoulder slammed against the doorframe as we entered the bathroom, and I bit back a groan. Maddie whimpered softly, her head lolling against my arm. I reached for the sink with a shaking hand and turned the faucet on full blast. The sound of rushing water filled the room, a roar that masked our presence. I collapsed against the cabinet, chest heaving, muscles burning. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice barely audible, "we need to throw up. Now." Maddie opened her eyes halfway, dazed. Her pupils were dilated, but she was responsive. That was a good sign. I leaned her over the toilet and held her steady, using my free hand to guide her fingers to her throat. She gagged, once, twice, then began to vomit. It came up in waves, watery, violent, painful. She sobbed between heaves, but she kept going. I turned to the sink and did the same. The act was horrible. My throat burned, my ribs ached, and bile filled my mouth. But I didn't stop until nothing was left. I pressed my forehead to the cool porcelain and breathed. We were buying ourselves time, maybe even saving our lives. The sedative, whatever Lauren had used, was powerful. My limbs still felt like sandbags, my heartbeat fluttered in irregular skips, and black dots danced at the edge of my vision, but my thoughts were starting to sharpen. I could move, I could think, and that meant we had a chance. Maddie leaned against me, her small body trembling. I wrapped my arm around her and whispered soothing nonsense, whatever came to mind. She didn't speak, but she didn't resist either. Then the next realization hit. We needed help. I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed the power button. Nothing. No screen, no vibration, just a black mirror staring back at me. I held the power button longer. Still nothing. The battery hadn't been low. I had charged it that morning. My hands began to tremble, for a different reason now. I crossed the room to the wall-mounted landline near the towel rack, picked up the receiver. Not a dial tone, not even static, just silence. Lauren had thought of everything. I sat down on the cold tile, gripping the receiver like it might suddenly change its mind. But it didn't. My breathing quickened, my head spun. She had planned this meticulously, the dinner, the dosage, the dead phones, the quiet. She hadn't intended to kill us in a rage. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a strategy, a decision, an exit plan. And that made it worse. I stood on shaking legs and opened the undersink cabinet. There was a flashlight, still wrapped in its rubber casing. I grabbed it, tucked it under my arm, and helped Maddie stand. She was barely able to stay upright, but her eyes were clearer now. She was fighting. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." I wrapped her in my hoodie, zipping it tight around her torso. She looked even smaller than usual, a child shrinking into herself. But she nodded. I opened the bathroom door and peered into the hallway. The house was silent. No footsteps, no sounds from the kitchen. The faint murmur of the television still played behind the bedroom door. I led Maddie down the hall, through the laundry room, and into the garage. The garage door was old and heavy. The motor had gone out months ago, and I hadn't had time to fix it. That would be our advantage now. I found the manual release and pulled. The door groaned in protest as I lifted it. Slow and painful, praying it wouldn't scream loud enough to wake the dead. I peeked outside. Darkness. The driveway was empty. Lauren's car was gone. There were no headlights, no silhouettes in the windows, no movement in the yard. She had left. Or she wanted us to think she had. "Go," I whispered to Maddie. "To Mrs. West's house. Don't look back." She hesitated for only a second, then bolted barefoot across the lawn. I followed, dragging my aching legs behind me like dead weight. The cold grass against my feet felt like needles, and the world tilted every few steps. By the time I reached the front porch of the little blue house next door, Maddie was pounding on the door with both fists. It opened with a startled creak. Mrs. West stood there in her floral nightgown, eyes wide. She looked at us once. Our pale faces, the sweat on our skin, Maddie's tear-streaked cheeks. And she knew. "What happened?" she asked, stepping aside. I couldn't answer right away. My throat was raw, my vision doubled. "She poisoned us," I croaked. "My wife! She tried to kill us. Call 911. Mrs. West didn't hesitate. She locked the door behind us and grabbed her cordless phone from the table. Her voice was calm, efficient, as she gave the address and described the emergency. I collapsed onto the couch, holding Maddie close. Her fingers were still wrapped in mine, and neither of us let go. The sirens came quickly, red lights flashing through the windows, painting the walls in pulsing strokes of crimson. Paramedics burst through the front door, questions flying too fast to answer. I felt a needle slide into my arm, a mask pressed to my face. Voices barked orders. Hands lifted me onto a stretcher, but all I could see was Maddie's face. If she was alive. We were alive. And we weren't going to die in that house. But I also knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The hum of fluorescent lights in the hospital ceiling was the first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes. Not the burning in my throat, not the dull ache in every muscle, not even the tubes trailing from my arm or the cold air licking the back of my neck. It was the sound. That ever-present mechanical buzz of a sterile world. Clean, artificial, detached from the life I had almost lost. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed it. The dinner, the whisper, the escape. My mind was foggy, my memories like glass underwater, distorted, shimmering, hard to grasp. But then I turned my head and saw her. Maddie lay in the bed beside mine, small and curled beneath a hospital blanket, an oxygen tube wrapped gently across her face. Her hair was messy, her arms dotted with adhesive marks, but she was breathing. I watched the rise and fall of her chest, rhythmic and steady, and reality came crashing back with a vengeance. She was alive. We both were. A nurse entered the room shortly after, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the monitors. She didn't flinch when I tried to sit up, didn't gasp at the bandages or bruises. Her composure was professional, steady. "You're awake," she said, her voice calm. "Try not to move too quickly. You're still metabolizing the toxins." I nodded slowly, my tongue thick and dry. "My daughter?" "She's stable," the nurse said. "She was responsive during the night. We're keeping her for observation." I didn't ask what they had found. I didn't need to. The nurse seemed to understand. "The toxicology screen came back a few hours ago. It was a high-dose sedative, benzodiazepine compound, possibly combined with a tranquilizer, crushed, most likely, and mixed into your food. You were lucky you purged it when you did." Lucky. The word echoed bitterly in my mind. There was nothing lucky about what had happened. There was instinct, panic, maybe grace, but not luck. We hadn't won a lottery. We had escaped an execution. I looked back at Maddie, at the faint flutter of her eyelashes. The guilt surged like a wave, unexpected and ruthless. I had brought this woman into our lives. I had let her close. I had let my guard down again and again, excusing every sign, brushing aside every warning bell because I didn't want to face what was in front of me. Now my daughter was in a hospital bed because of my blindness. The nurse left quietly, promising to return with the doctor. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant beep of machines and Maddie's soft breathing. I sank back against the pillow, exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. It was almost an hour later when the doctor came in, followed by a police officer in uniform. The doctor asked a few basic questions: how I felt, whether I could recall the events before the hospital, whether I had any allergies or medications. I answered in short, clipped phrases, all while keeping one eye on the officer standing silently by the door. When the doctor finished, she nodded and excused herself. The officer stepped forward. "Mr. Harper," he said, "I'm Officer Keller with the Atlanta Police Department. I understand this is a difficult time, but we'd like to get your statement as soon as you're able." I nodded. "Now is fine." He took out a notepad. No tape recorder, no dramatic gestures, just a pen and steady hands. I told him everything: the dinner, the food, the symptoms, Maddie's collapse, Lauren's whisper, the bathroom, the phones, the escape. Every moment etched into my mind like acid on glass. I recounted it all with the detached clarity of someone replaying a nightmare on loop. When I finished, Officer Keller didn't speak right away. He just stared at the notepad for a moment, tapping the pen against the margin. "She's not at the house," he said eventually. "Her car is gone, her phone's off, no signs of forced entry or struggle, but the landline's been cut. The cameras outside were disconnected. Your mobile device appears to have been tampered with. The back panel was removed and the battery damaged." I felt a coldness creep down my spine. "So she planned it." He nodded. "Looks that way. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" "Not yet. We've issued a statewide alert. Border Patrol has been notified. Airports too. But so far, nothing." The nausea returned with a new kind of intensity. She could disappear. She could vanish like smoke, leaving behind a shell of a family she tried to destroy. I gripped the side of the bed to keep myself from falling into that pit of panic again. "She's smart," I said. "Too smart. This wasn't impulsive. She's had time to plan it." "We're treating this as a high-risk situation," Officer Keller said. "Attempted murder of a minor adds serious weight. We'll do everything we can to find her." But his words felt hollow, not because he didn't mean them, because I knew what Lauren was capable of. The next 2 days passed in a blur of IV drips, blood draws, and hushed conversations with nurses. Maddie improved steadily. Her strength returned slowly, and by the third morning she was sitting up, drinking juice, watching cartoons with a hollow stare. She didn't talk much, not about what had happened. I didn't push her. The doctors cleared her to be discharged by the end of the week, though they wanted to monitor me for a bit longer due to the amount of sedative I had absorbed. I didn't argue. It was on the second night that everything began to unravel. I was dozing lightly when a nurse entered, followed by a tall figure I hadn't seen in years. My sister, Ashley, stood in the doorway with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and an expression that oscillated between fury and heartbreak. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, stepping inside. I sat up, the movement sending a spike of pain through my back. "You didn't have to—" "Don't," she interrupted. "Of course I did." She stayed with me through the night, brought Maddie books, puzzles, snacks. She was a whirlwind of steadiness, and I hadn't realized how much I needed that. It was the next morning, over a stale cup of hospital coffee, that she said it. "I wasn't going to tell you," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't know how. I didn't want to believe it either, but I saw Lauren with someone about a month ago. I froze. They were having dinner, midtown, some trendy place. He was young, late 20s maybe, expensive watch, slick smile. I saw them kiss. I didn't say anything. The room was spinning again. I followed them, she continued. I don't know why. They went to a condo. He let her in like it was normal, like they'd done it before. My mouth was dry. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought maybe it was a phase. Maybe she was going through something. I thought you'd figure it out or she'd come clean. I didn't expect. She couldn't finish. I didn't ask her to. Later that afternoon, Officer Keller returned. We got her, he said without preamble. Caught her at the airport, trying to board a flight to Belize with a fake passport. She had a second phone, cash, and a go bag with foreign currency. She's in custody now. I closed my eyes. Relief didn't come. Not right away. Only a deep, aching fatigue. The investigation moved quickly from that point on. Lauren was charged with multiple felonies: attempted murder, child endangerment, possession and use of a controlled substance with intent to harm. The prosecutor had more than enough. But the part that chilled me most came after the arrest. Through a series of subpoenas and financial disclosures, the rest of the story came into focus. The man Lauren had been seeing was Logan Mays, the only son of a hotel magnate who had passed away 6 months prior. Logan had inherited a vast estate, but with one stipulation. To claim the full amount, he had to marry someone who had no previous marriage, no children, and no outstanding legal or financial obligation. Lauren didn't qualify, unless she erased us. The pieces fit too perfectly. The poisoning, the quiet, the exit plan, the new identity. She hadn't just wanted to leave. She wanted to vanish. And for us to vanish too. The clarity that came with that realization was devastating. She hadn't broken under pressure. She hadn't snapped in a moment of passion. She had calculated it. My wife of 12 years had calmly, efficiently planned our deaths as if they were items on a checklist. I stood by Maddie's bedside that night and watched her sleep. The machines had been removed, the tubes gone. She was free of all wires and threats now. But something inside me would never be untangled. Because knowing the truth didn't make it hurt less. It made it permanent. The trial didn't take long. Some cases drag on for years, buried in motions, continuances, and strategic delays. But not this one. Lauren's arrest at the airport with a forged passport and a second phone, combined with her sudden attempt to liquidate assets and her involvement with Logan Mays, gave the prosecution everything they needed before the opening arguments even began. It was a rare thing in the justice system: clarity, hard proof, and motive carved into stone. I attended every hearing, not because I wanted to, not because I needed to watch her sit behind that defense table and pretend this was all some misunderstanding, but because Maddie deserved someone there who could bear the weight of what had been done to us. I didn't flinch when Lauren's attorney tried to float the idea of temporary insanity or emotional fragility. I didn't react when he described her as a loving mother who had simply lost her way. I sat quietly, hands folded, eyes forward, letting the silence speak for itself. Maddie was spared from testifying. The court agreed to use her initial statement, recorded gently and privately by a child psychologist. She had recounted everything in perfect, devastating detail. How the mashed potatoes tasted a little bitter. How I had whispered to her to stay still. How we had crawled to the bathroom, thrown up, escaped. How her mom didn't seem scared or sad, only quiet. When the guilty verdict was read, I felt no rush of satisfaction, no victory, just finality. The gavel fell, and with it, the chapter of our life that I had spent years trying to preserve shattered completely. Lauren was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her expression never changed. Not during sentencing, not even when the judge described her actions as coldly calculated and morally bankrupt. She sat there with the same empty gaze I had seen that night in the kitchen, as if she had already moved on in her mind to the life she never got to have. In the days that followed, I moved Maddie and myself into my sister Ashley's house. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just until we figured things out. But time has a way of settling in. Ashley's place was small but warm, the kind of home where the walls held laughter and the light from the kitchen windows was always soft. Maddie took to it slowly, moving through the rooms like a shadow for the first few weeks. She spoke when spoken to, ate what she was given, slept in short, restless spurts. At night, I could hear her footsteps padding down the hallway to my room. She would crawl into bed beside me without a word, just a quiet presence under the blanket, pressing close like she was anchoring herself to the one part of her world that hadn't disappeared. I never turned her away. I never asked her to explain. I simply pulled the blanket around her and let the silence do the work. My own healing came in fragments. I didn't trust my thoughts at first. Every decision felt suspicious. Every moment of peace seemed artificial. I double-checked locks. I charged my phone obsessively. I read warning signs into friendly faces. But over time, the noise faded. The panic softened. I began to let myself believe we were safe. People asked me, friends, colleagues, distant relatives, what I had learned from it all, what I would tell someone else who might find themselves in a situation like mine. I never gave them the easy answer. There isn't one, but I always came back to the same idea. The thing that saved us wasn't strength. It wasn't courage. It was silence. In that kitchen, with poison in my veins and my daughter slipping beside me, I didn't scream, I didn't flail, I didn't call for help. I listened. I waited. I made a single quiet choice to stay still, to observe, to protect. And that decision, that moment of restraint, made all the difference. Because there are times when action will get you killed, when movement will trigger the collapse, when the only power you have left is the refusal to panic. Maddie and I rebuilt slowly. We found a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery, someone who didn't talk down to her, who listened more than they spoke. Maddie liked that. She started drawing again. Not bright, happy pictures, not at first, but expressions of feeling. Rain in windows, silhouettes in doorways. Over time, color crept back into her sketches. One day she drew a dog, then a son, then the two of us, holding hands. She didn't talk about Lauren much, neither did I. Sometimes we'd be walking through the grocery store and she'd pause by the freezer section, staring at a box of mashed potatoes. I'd watch her shoulders tense, then slowly relax. She never said anything. She didn't need to. We never returned to the old house. I sold it through a realtor I trusted, sight unseen. I didn't want to walk through those rooms again. Didn't want to see the kitchen where we almost died, or the bathroom where we saved ourselves. The memories would always live there, like smoke in the wallpaper. I chose to let them stay behind. Ashley offered us her guest room as long as we needed. No expiration date, no pressure. She was our anchor in those first uncertain months, steady and kind, without ever making us feel broken. The world moved on quickly. News outlets picked up the story, spun it into headlines and segments, then let it fade for the next scandal. People forget, but we didn't. We couldn't. Every day we lived after that night was a new kind of defiance, a quiet rebellion against the woman who tried to erase us. Maddie turned 11 3 months later. We had a small celebration at home, just Ashley, her husband, their 2 boys, and us. Maddie asked for a chocolate cake with strawberries on top. No candles, just cake. She smiled when she took her first bite, and I saw it, that light that had been missing for so long, a spark. After everyone went to bed, she curled up beside me on the couch, her head on my chest. "Do you think she thinks about us?" she asked. It was the first time she had brought Lauren up since the hospital. "I don't know," I said honestly. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't think about her much." I kissed the top of her head. "That's okay." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't the kind we used to fear. It was full, like a warm blanket in winter, a space where nothing had to be explained. I still have moments where I replay that night in my head, the taste of the food, the blur of the room, her voice, the way she said it, so calm, so sure. They'll both be gone soon. I used to wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard her, if I had passed out entirely, if Maddie had been alone, if we hadn't made it to the bathroom, if Lauren had waited a little longer. There are 100 versions of that night where we don't survive. I try not to get lost in them. Instead, I focus on the version that happened, the one where we listened, the one where silence saved us, the one where a father wrapped his arms around his daughter, whispered a single command, and waited for the moment that would let them escape. Now, when I lock the door at night, I feel something different. Not fear, not paranoia, because I know now that evil doesn't always wear a mask. It doesn't scream or rage or strike in daylight. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it pours you a glass of water and asks how your day was. And sometimes it cooks dinner. But I also know this. Love isn't blind. Real love sees clearly. It protects, it warns, it never poisons. Every day that Maddie and I wake up in a bed that is safe, under a roof that doesn't hide danger, is a victory I will never take for granted. We survived not because we fought back. We survived because we paused, we listened. And in that quiet, we found the strength to move again, on our own terms. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, powerful stories that stay with you. Feel free to share this video. You never know who might need to hear it. And if you're ready for more, check out the next story or explore the others on the channel. Your voice matters. Your instincts matter. Keep listening,